Just go live. Just go live. I'm not ready. I'm not ready at all, but we're just going to get through it anyway. How you doing, everybody? Happy Friday. My name is Deanna, and I'm streaming out of Humboldt County about Humboldt County to Humboldt County and anyone else who cares. I'm actually going through a class right now, so very thankful to the replay crew. I sit here and talk to myself a lot alone, which is quite all right. I don't mind, really. It's cool. We are in chapter 1 of our study right now. Oh, I should check to make sure I can hear myself. I'm a mediocre streamer. I have issues with sound a lot and stuff. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully everything sounds okay. Let me check. Let me make sure I'm happening here. Am I happening? Can you hear the words that are coming out of my face? Hopefully everything's okay. I can hear myself. Good. Very good. We're going through this book right here. This is a meaty, good book by Dr. Skousen. He also wrote The 5,000-Year Leap. And I've gone through that in the past. If you want to learn America's principles better, this is a great study. There's 28 principles that our Constitution was founded on, and it took this good man 40 years to compile them to really see what our Constitution was based on, what the founders were trying to do in the happy middle of tyranny and anarchy. So that is what we have, our Constitution. So this study, I'm not going to read through the whole chapter because it's just too long. It's like 20 pages. And the last one that I did read through the whole intro. However, by the time I was done with the 12 pages, my voice was shot. I barely could talk. It's not sounding really great right now, but we're going to get through it anyway. I'm going to start with the quiz. That was questions based on the intro. And then I'll get right into the reading. So here is the quiz 1. There's only, 14 questions, and I'll get through them real quick. I want to make this a really easy listening type of stream where it's like a good podcast. You could listen to this when you're doing chores. You could listen to this when you're trying to sleep, because I'm not going to get too excitable. And it's really just a study course. I'm really just going to be reading the book and doing the quiz with you guys. And so hopefully I'll always get this started, before 5 minutes. I know last time it was like 7 or 8 minutes, but hopefully we're going to get started. What are we at here? We're at 3 minutes. Not too bad. Okay. So here we go. 14 questions. Number 1, how many people are generally included when we say the founding fathers? Well, 55 attended the convention, 66 participated in the process, and there were 121 signers. Okay, number 2, who was the greatest philosopher of the present age? Benjamin Franklin. Number 3, who charms, captivates, and leads away the senses of all who hear him? Gouverneur Morris. I have preamble here and that he was 36 years old. Number 4, who knew all the political institutions of the world in detail? James Wilson. Number 5, show statistically how the U.S. Constitution is the world's greatest success formula. In 1900, America had 6% of the land and population, but produced over 50% of goods and services. Number 6, what are 3 things all mankind seek? Freedom, prosperity, and peace. Number 7, what is the key to all human progress? Freedom, revolution. Number 8, the founders viewed human nature as a mixture of sunshine and shadow. Number 9, name 2 founders who called the writing of the Constitution a miracle: George Washington and James Madison. Number 10, John Adams viewed the settlement of America as the opening of a grand scene and design in Providence. Number 11, what did British Prime Minister Gladstone say about the Constitution? was the greatest work ever struck off by pen of man? Number 12. What kind of men did Samuel Langdon say we should elect to public office? Honest, God-fearing, and those who hate covetousness. Number 13. Why did the founders have basically the same beliefs even though they differed on details? They read the same books. And lastly, number 14. What should be America's greatest export? Freedom. Major William Pierce never said a word in 4 months, but wrote how people said things. James Wilson, the Scotland government seems to be his peculiar study, traces causes and effects of revolutions in history, country history knowledge. Those are just some notes I had for that. And so as I begin reading, I'm sure you guys have figured out, I can't really pay attention to the chat. I can't really get distracted, or this won't be such a great podcast. So we are starting on chapter 1, and I'm not actually sure where I'm going to end it. I just know that I'm not reading all 20 pages right now. I think I'm going to wrap it up around 10, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. The man who discovered America's freedom formula. I guess I don't have the other side of the page is a picture of George Washington here. So let's get up to here. And thank you to anyone who's coming in. Oh, Carolina, good to see you, honey. Bobcat Philo, thank you for being here. One of the most exciting stories in American history is the account of the man who tunneled back into the ancient past and was among the first to rediscover the remarkable formula which allowed the United States to become the first free nation in modern times. As a matter of fact, it took the early Americans 180 years, from 1607 to 1787, to put it all together. But when it finally settled into place, their formula ignited the fires of freedom all over the world. Perhaps there is a tendency to take much of this for granted. However, the founders warned us that their formula for freedom could be lost in a single generation. No doubt our appreciation of the founders' achievements will be stimulated by briefly tracing the fascinating explorations of the one man who probably had as much influence on the final results as any person living in that day. Who was Thomas Jefferson? Practically every American knows the name of Thomas Jefferson, but very few Americans know his story. We will first record a few biographical facts and then and then present Jefferson's little-known discovery in which he uncovered the ancient formula for a society based on freedom, prosperity, and peace. Thomas Jefferson was born April 13th, 1743, up near the Blue Ridge Mountains of what is now the western section of the state of Virginia. By that time, George Washington was 11 years old. In Philadelphia, Benjamin Franklin was 37 years old. He had already invented the Franklin stove and was city postmaster. In Boston, Samuel Adams, who is often called the father of the Revolution, was just graduating from Harvard with a master's degree at the age of 21. Samuel's younger cousin, John Adams, was 8 years old when Jefferson was born. One day, he would induce Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence. Patrick Henry was 7 years old. However, James Madison, who would have so much to do with putting Jefferson's ideas into the Constitution, would not be born until 8 years later. Obviously, it was an illustrious age, and the names of men who would later receive international fame because of their connection with the founding of the United States were beginning to appear on the American scene. Jefferson's early life. Jefferson was born at Shadwell on the Rivanna River, which forms one of the headwaters of the James River. It was rugged frontier country. Jefferson never considered himself an aristocrat dandy, even though his mother was from the prominent Randolph family. Wait, did I skip a top part? No. Okay. Oh, I see. and his father was a member of the House of Burgesses. Young Tom took pride in the fact that his father, Peter Jefferson, was not only the hardest working man he had ever seen, but was also reputed to be one of the strongest men in the whole Dominion. It was said that he could upend 2 tobacco hogsheads at the same time, each weighing over 500 pounds. Gosh, I swear I read this already, but no. We read the intro, right? I'm sorry. Just double checking I didn't screw up. Of course, I have read this whole book before, but we're reading it again. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Peter Jefferson helped survey and draw the first accurate map of Virginia. He was Justice of the Peace and a lieutenant colonel in the county militia. Tom's father had a tremendous influence in shaping the character of his son and inspiring him with a powerful sense of commitment in building up the great new American Commonwealth. It therefore came as a tremendous emotional shock to Thomas Jefferson when his father suddenly died. Young Jefferson was then only 14 years of age. This made Thomas Jefferson the head of his family, with an estate located in one of the most challenging and rugged sections of the Virginia frontier. He later realized that this was a point in his life when he might easily have lost his way, and afterwards commented on the challenge and temptations he faced as a teenager. When I recollect that at 14 years of age, the whole care and direction of myself was thrown on myself entirely, without a relation or friend qualified to advise or guide me, and recollect the various sorts of bad company with which I associated from time to time, I am astonished I did not turn off with some of them and become as worthless to society as they were. Woo! It makes me want to know some of his friends. Graduates from college at age 19. Fortunately, his father's will provided sufficient funds for him to further his education. Jefferson first dug into Latin and Greek so he could read classical works in their original languages. He seems to have been equally diligent in other studies. By the age of 16, he was allowed to enter the College of William and Mary in Virginia's capital city of Williamsburg. He entered as an advanced student. Even at 16, he was remarkably well developed. At around 6 feet 2 inches in height, he stood nearly a head taller than the average citizen of those days. One who knew him at this time described him as follows. He was a fresh, bright, healthy-looking youth with large feet and hands, red hair, freckled skin, hazel gray eyes, prominent cheekbones, and a heavy chin. His form was straight as a gun barrel, sinewy and alert, and he cultivated his strength by familiarity with saddle, gun, canoe, and minuet. He early showed perfect self-reliance and had a strong taste for mathematics and mechanics. Let me make sure this is the same page. Yep. His friend John Page, who later became governor of Virginia, was amazed that Jefferson was literally in love with learning. No matter how much he might be enjoying a party or the prospects of a hunt, he could tear himself away from his dearest friends to fly his studies. His intensity with books was inspired in part by a warm friendship which developed between himself and a favorite professor named Dr. William Small. Jefferson wrote, "It was my great good fortune and what probably fixed the destinies of my life that Dr. William Small of Scotland was then professor of mathematics, a man profound in most of the useful branches of science, with a happy talent of communication, correct and gentlemanly manners, and an enlarged and liberal mind. He, most happily for me, became so attached to me and made me his daily companion when not engaged in the school. And from his conversation, I got my first views of the expansion of science and of the system of things in which we are placed." By the time Jefferson had graduated from William and Mary at the age of 19, he had developed mature study habits. It was not unusual for him to spend up to 14 hours a day with his books, his violin, and a run each evening to keep himself physically fit. We read that during the most closely occupied days of his college life, it was his habit to study until 2 o'clock at night and rise at dawn. The day he spent in close application, the only recreation being a run at twilight to a certain stone, which stood at a point a mile beyond the limits of town. Young Thomas Jefferson's three distinguished friends. Striving for excellence was Thomas Jefferson's natural habit, and the ability he achieved with 3 hours a day on the violin paid off handsomely in several phases of his life. During his college days, it brought him to the attention of the royal governor, Francis Fauquier. The governor was no ordinary politician, but a former student and protege of Sir Isaac Newton in England. Fauquier was an economist of some repute, a student of physics, and a fellow of the Royal Society of England. We have already mentioned the first of Jefferson's distinguished friends, Professor William Small, and it was the professor who introduced Jefferson to Governor Fauquier. Before long, the governor had Jefferson playing his violin in weekly concerts conducted at the governor's palace. Professor Small also introduced Jefferson to the famous George Wythe, who would later sign the Declaration of Independence and serve at the Constitutional Convention. Wythe, pronounced with, was the first law professor in America and later had a tremendous influence on Jefferson's study of the law. For some time, Governor Fauquier, George Wythe, and Professor Small had been meeting each week for dinner and philosophical discussions. Now they included young Thomas Jefferson. At these dinners, Jefferson later recalled, "I have heard more good sense, more rational and philosophical conversations than in all my life besides." 5 years of specialized study with George Wythe. It was the greatest stroke of good fortune that Thomas Jefferson had the opportunity to be accepted by George Wythe as a protege for the study of law. The two got along famously. Wythe thought a well-trained lawyer should know just about everything, and Thomas Jefferson had the appetite for it. He studied not only the law, but also languages, physics, agriculture, mathematics, philosophy, chemistry, anatomy, zoology, botany, religion, politics, history, literature, rhetoric, and virtually every other subject imaginable, always recording quotations and observations in his personal notebook. Jefferson called this a time of life when I was bold in the pursuit of knowledge, never fearing to follow the truth and reason to whatever results they led. He had an amazing appetite for languages, so that by adulthood he could read Latin, Greek, Spanish, Italian, and Anglo-Saxon. In addition to the mastery of the spoken word in his native tongue, he became very fluent in French. The day that changed his life. During these days of intensive study in Williamsburg, which was the Dominion capital, he occasionally broke away to hear the debates in the House of Burgesses. On May 29, 1765, a newly elected member of the Assembly named Patrick Henry rose to give his famous oration against the Stamp Act. This is the speech in which he said, "If this be treason, make the most of it." Jefferson was there. He says, "I attended the debate standing at the door of the lobby of the House of Burgesses and heard the splendid display of Mr. Henry's talents as a popular orator. They were great indeed, such as I have never heard from any other man. He appeared to me to speak as Homer wrote." Something remarkable happened to Thomas Jefferson that day. As he stood listening intently to Patrick Henry's eloquent denunciation of the abuses that were being heaped upon the American colonies, it kindled a flame in his soul. He felt such a surge of fervor for the cause of freedom and justice that the flame burned brightly the rest of his days. He later referred to this as the most important day of his life. He is admitted to the bar. In early 1767, Jefferson was brought before the General Court of Virginia for an oral examination to gain admittance to the bar. He was being sponsored by George Wythe, Virginia's foremost legal authority. Since most lawyers submitted themselves to the bar examination after a little more than 6 months' preparation, Jefferson's erudite young mind created quite a stir among the judges that day. No matter what the subject, he seemed to know more than they did. It must have pleased George Wythe to see his brilliant pupil respond to the penetrating questions from the gentleman on the bench. At the age of 23, Jefferson was admitted to the bar and immediately moved back to his hometown of Shadwell, where he began the practice of law. The next year, he was elected to represent his county in the House of Burgesses. Jefferson's marriage. Thomas Jefferson was always very popular socially, but he was rather shy around the young ladies. He seems to have adored them from a distance. When he was 19, he conjured up enough courage to ask a beautiful belle of Williamsburg named Belinda Burwell to marry him. He had practiced his proposal with usual thoroughness, but when I had an opportunity, a few broken sentences, uttered in great disorder and interrupted with pauses of uncommon length, were the two visible marks of my strange confusion. No doubt, Belinda listened to the painful declamation with astonishment and amusement, but no more so than a short time later, when he came back again, even better rehearsed. Jefferson got his answer a few weeks later when Belinda married Jefferson's best friend. And his best friend, not knowing Jefferson's deep feelings for his fiancée, asked Thomas to be the best man at the wedding. It was not until 8 years later that Jefferson gained enough courage to propose again. This time, it was to a very attractive young widow in Williamsburg, Martha Wales Skelton, whose husband had died before she was 20. She often accompanied Jefferson on the harpsichord when he played his violin. From this association, a romance developed of the classical variety, which is usually found only in storybooks. Jefferson built a beautiful home for his new bride called Monticello, which is today one of the most famous houses in America. In 1770, Shadwell family home went up in flames and burned every book and paper he owned. But by 1775, he had built his library back up to 1,000 volumes. For the end of his life, his collection of his finest literature was purchased by the government and became the nucleus for the United States Library of Congress. His appetite for learning paid handsome dividends as one field of knowledge cross-fertilized with another. He became highly credible in several fields of science. He contrived a whole series of inventions for which he never attempted to secure patents. One of his servants, a trained tinsmith, admired Jefferson's ability to fashion keys, locks, and chains out of brass and iron. One scholar credits him with firing the signal gun of American paleontology. He also took great interest in the origin, languages, and customs of the Indians. Oh, I think I skipped a paragraph. No wonder that came in so weird. Let me start here. Thomas Jefferson practiced law for 7 years before the torrent of revolutionary events swept him away in another direction. That's my bad. I'm so sorry. Or did I read that? Oh my gosh, I'm so off today. I'm so sorry. He was so painstakingly preparing his cases, he gained an excellent reputation throughout Virginia. Between 1767 and 1774, he handled over 1,000 cases. It was said in jest that Jefferson won practically all of his cases because he always chose the right side. Jefferson drifted away from law as he became increasingly interested in the history of man's efforts to set up a free society. He wondered why the efforts of leaders in the past had so consistently failed. He pored over the carefully collected books in his library, which included many of the classical works of scholars from the previous 25 centuries. And that's where I came in about the Shadwell family home burning up in flames. And I'm going to pick it up from here. He amassed a large number of Indian vocabularies as part of his study. He studied architecture, drawing still in existence reflect his highly professional skill. Fame comes early to Jefferson. As the years went by, his mind became a scintillating reservoir of expertise in so many fields that it is difficult to find an example of equal accomplishment either then or now. His research was so thorough and his conclusions so carefully drawn that a well-educated traveler from New England who engaged him in conversation without knowing his identity later wrote, "When he spoke of the law, I thought he was a lawyer. When he talked about mechanics, I was sure he was an engineer. When he got into medicine, it was evident that he was a physician. When he discussed theology, I was convinced he must be a clergyman. When he talked of literature, I made up my mind that I had run against a college professor who knew everything. During August 1774, Jefferson wrote a paper which sent his name skirting across the Atlantic to England. It was called A Summary View of the Rights of the British America. It provided a legal, historical, and political analysis of the rights of the English colonists in America and accused the Crown of ignoring and abusing those rights. The British government was not accustomed to thinking of Americans as citizens with certain unalienable English rights. Jefferson's published pronouncement was distributed throughout America and published in England. It attracted widespread attention and aroused a considerable amount of bristling indignation in the royal court. Jefferson was then 31 years of age. And here is the summary view of the Rights of British America, Revolutionary Tract by Thomas Jefferson. Resolved that a humble and dutiful address be presented to His Majesty, begging leave to lay before him the united complaints of His Majesty's subjects in America, to represent to His Majesty that, when he reflects, he is no more than the chief officer of the people, appointed by the laws and circumscribed with definite powers to assist in working the great machine of government. Single acts of tyranny may be ascribed to the accidental opinion of a day, but a series of oppressions pursued unalterably through every change of ministers too plainly prove a deliberate, systematical plan of reducing us to slavery. Can anyone reason be assigned why 160,000 electors in the island of Great Britain should give law to 4 millions in the states of America, every individual of whom is equal to every individual of them in virtue, in understanding, and in bodily strength? While the people have delegated the powers of legislation, when they are dissolved, the powers reverts to the people, who may use it to unlimited extent. We forbear to trace consequences further. The dangers are conspicuous. Upon your breast, sire, to liberal and expanded thought, let not the name of George III be a blot in the page of history. And I'm just going to do 2 more pages here. Young Jefferson goes to Congress. By 1775, the tide of history was running fast. American blood had been shed by British redcoats at Lexington and Concord on April 19th. Then came the Battle of Bunker Hill, actually Breed's Hill, on June 17th, where more than 450 Americans were shot or bayoneted. No doubt Jefferson was among those who wondered if King George was suffering from another of the fits of insanity which plagued him from time to time. Nothing seemed to appease the king, neither a proffered payment for the Boston tea nor pleas of loyal submission. He seemed determined to treat Americans as some of his most ferocious enemies. All civil government was suspended in Massachusetts, and Boston was occupied first by General Gage and later by General Howe as commander-in-chief of all British troops in America. Like other Americans, Jefferson wondered where it would all end. Jefferson was sent to the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia, arriving June 20th, 1775. He was one of the youngest members present. Only John Jay of New York was slightly younger. In the fall, Jefferson had to leave the Congress because of the death of his 18-month-old daughter. His wife and his mother were also very ill. 1776, the fateful year. There were dark forebodings as the tide of history moved in upon the American colonies in January of 1776. Word came that the American expedition to capture Quebec had failed. General Montgomery was killed, and Benedict Arnold, who had been a hero in this campaign, was wounded. It was only a matter of months before the Americans were driven out of Canada completely. Jefferson was also extremely concerned about the bad news from Boston. Washington had lost over 4,000 of his soldiers. Many of those remaining were sick. Others were disheartened. When their enlistments were up, a mere handful re-enlisted. And since the British would not come out and fight, Washington reported that the restless Americans passed much of the time simply fighting among themselves. To make matters worse, King George virtually disowned the American colonies. He announced that if the colonies were attacked by foreign foes, Britain would furnish no help. American ships were declared to be free booty, which meant it would be legal to capture any American vessel on the high seas and take it over, cargo and all. As for the crew, they would be impressed into the British Navy. It was in this dismal setting that Thomas Jefferson commenced what would turn out to be one of the most important years of his life, but he would have scarcely suspected it. His mother died on March 31st, which was a great blow to Jefferson. He suffered excruciating migraine headaches for the next 5 weeks after his mother died. Let me make sure got the right page. His tensions were further aggravated when he read the 6 drafts which had been submitted for a Virginia Constitution. All were defective, even though they had been drafted by such illustrious patriots as John Adams, Richard Henry Lee, Meriwether Smith, George Mason, Carter Braxton, Patrick Henry, and others of high repute. It was obvious that the best minds in the country were still struggling to find a proper formula for the efficient self-government of a free and independent state. Jefferson therefore decided to try his own hand at Constitution writing. In spite of his morning and migraine headaches, Jefferson wrote 3 separate drafts during the next 5 weeks. However, he was robbed of the pleasure of delivering them personally to the legislature in Williamsburg because he was sent as a delegate to Congress. He arrived in Philadelphia on May 14th, carrying the 3rd draft in his pocket. The longer Jefferson stayed in Philadelphia, the worse he felt. He had an intense anxiety to be in Williamsburg. Finally, Jefferson wrote a letter requesting that he be given a leave of absence from Congress so he could lend a hand in writing the Virginia Constitution. Fortunately, his request was denied. Had it been otherwise, he would have missed the greatest honor of his life, the privilege of writing the Declaration of Independence. Frustrated and disappointed, Jefferson sent his 3rd draft to the Virginia legislature. However, they used only an insignificant portion of it. His constitution would have overturned the whole aristocratic structure of the state. Virginia was not yet ready for such a revolutionary change. Do I want to stop it right there? I think I'll stop it right there because I think that I started on 15, right? I think we go to 35. I don't know. We go to 39. Okay. Okay, we'll read about the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to read 2 more pages because, oh no, let me see. 26. It really keeps going into the Declaration for quite a few chapters, so I think I do want to stop it there. I don't want to break it up. I want to stop it there and start on the Declaration of Independence when we do this again. I don't have a set schedule yet. I'm sorry. Well, hi, everybody. Good to see y'all. 33 minutes, 34 minutes, 35 minutes. That'll be good. That'll be good. Hey, Devil Dog. Hey, Pamela. Yeah, I'm reading fake bullshit. Well, thanks, Bobcat Fila. Tell me how you really feel. Nothing I read is real. Well, why are you here? Why don't you just go somewhere else? Go somewhere else. You know, you do have that option. You do have that option. Don't bring me down, man. It's your problem. Well, now I know what camp you're in, so this will be the last time. Maybe the last time. I don't know. For you, buddy. For you. I don't know when I'm coming back because I'm not sure yet. But I'm glad I got one in this week. Thank you guys for being here. I hope y'all are doing good things. It's March. We should be planting stuff, right? Shouldn't we be planting stuff? Thanks. I think I'm going to go get some tomatoes because I didn't start any starts yet. But that's what's up. Grow food. Grow food, right? All right, you guys. I don't know when I'll be back. Like I said, I'm just glad to have pulled this one off. I don't have a schedule yet, but I will be back next week. I love y'all. Take good care. Bye.